John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. Covers the league nationally. National NFL columnist for FanRag Sports NFL at JF McMullen on Twitter. You can follow him there, and he joins us now on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN with a look at the Eagles wrapping up OTAs, some of the NFL national stories that are happening as well. Johnny Mac is back. What's up, pal?
Doing well. Hope you're having a good afternoon, gentlemen.
It's a fine day down the New Jersey seashore. How was the NovaCare Center? How's the NovaCare complex treating everybody?
Well, I'm sure it's a brilliant day. We're not allowed in. We only get.
But they don't even let you on. They don't even let you on, like, on site.
No, we're not allowed on site except for the days where the practices are open.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. I thought you were at least allowed to, like, hunker in that little media bunker they have for you guys.
Media house.
Yeah, we have our own house, but we're not allowed in it. Next week we get to see 2 days, Monday and Friday, and then the mini camp that Pete was mentioning, that's open all 3 days. So that's when we'll really get to see how the 2017 Eagles are starting to shape up.
Good stuff. As we know, the Eagles, Jim Schwartz spoke. We heard from Doug Peterson. A lot of interesting storylines for this team as we are kind of getting ready for training camp here, one of which I'd like to get into with you, and I wrote about this at 97.3 ESPN.com, the whole offensive line look. You got Alan Barbre, who Barbre was a starter last year, and I think this story kind of spawns off multiple stories about how the Eagles really search for depth and versatility across the offensive line, and nowhere is that more evident in the fact that they're going to have Alan Barbre, it looks like, go from a guy that really they praised a lot last year, John, as, wow, he's a tremendous left guard for us, so much so that they played Hanapuli Paitai Vaitai over there at right tackle. How'd I do on that one? Not very good, I know. Moved him over to right tackle before moving Barbre out there because they said they liked him so much at left guard. But now it seems like they are resigned to using his versatility and using that kind of a backup offensive line with Barbre and Wisniewski and even Seumalo, a versatile player. It seems like they really went out of their way to add depth and versatility to this line.
Yeah, they did because they had so many injuries last season. They kind of realized it's a possibility, and if that happens, you want to be ready for it. And by and large, they built up the interior specifically, and they do have a ton of confidence in Alan Barbre. I think when you talk about him, it's more the assumption that we know Alan can play left guard. That's not an issue. They prefer him to be the game day swing tackle and have Isaac Seumalo start at left guard. And remember, that was the plan last season when we were starting this process. The hope was, of course, he was a rookie. And I think one of the major issues with Seumalo last year was where he went to college. He went to college at Oregon State. He wasn't they have the quarter system. So similar to Elijah Qualls this year, who's also a Pac-12 guy, he was not allowed to be at OTAs because of that rule that the NFL has. And so basically those kinds of players, they come for rookie camp, and then they're gone, and they don't return until training camp. So that set him back as a rookie tremendously. Then he got injured in training camp, and all of a sudden Allen had to play left guard. And that's how things kind of unfolded the way they did last season. But for him and the confidence they have into, I think it's very similar to Malcolm Jenkins and when Malcolm plays in the slot. The last 2 years, Malcolm Jenkins doesn't go near the slot in off-season work or in training camp because they know he can play it. And they know he doesn't need repetitions, and they're trying to look at other players. And then all of a sudden, they get to the regular season, and they've needed him to play that position, and he generally does it very, very well. I think it's similar with Alan Barbre, not the same type of player as Malcolm, but they have such confidence in him they understand he can play left guard if they need him, but they would prefer to see if Seumalo, because of his upside as a player's ceiling, as a player's athleticism, they want to give him first shot at it. And if he doesn't play well, I got news for you. Alan Barbre will be the left guard.
Yeah, it seems like he's kind of like their wild card of, hey, we don't want to start you, but if we have to, we feel fine with that. Let me ask you this scenario: if Jason Peters got hurt in week 1, what would the line look like?
If he got hurt week 1, it's pretty clear because he's not here. So that was one of the most interesting things of OTAs thus far. They did put Lane Johnson on the left side, which was a little bit of a surprise to me because I think my original thought was they would just insert Barbre at left tackle and keep Lane at his natural position and keep that chemistry going because Jason's going to be back. But because he's not here and they flip Lane Johnson over and they put Big V in at right tackle, I think that's pretty clear what their plan would be. And that would be Lane Johnson at left tackle and Vaitai at right tackle.
That wouldn't be a spot where they use Allen at right tackle?
I don't think so. He would still remain as the. You think
Vaitai's ahead of Allen?
He's not necessarily ahead. What it is, it's very similar to Seumalo. Because of his youth, because of his athleticism, they would like to give him the first opportunity to take the job in that type of circumstance.
Right.
And it's like Old Faithful.
Gotcha.
If it doesn't work, then they go to Allen because they know Allen can do it.
Right. And Peters has started all 16 games 3 of the last 4 years, but we know in 2015, he started 14 out of 14. He got hurt, and then he missed the 1 year. He ruptured his Achilles not once but twice, but that didn't cause him to miss a full season. But we know he's getting older. He's had some injuries in his past, and it seems that he gets nicked up at least a series or two almost every single game where he has to go to the sidelines. A couple of years ago, that seemed to be the case. So there are opportunities there where the left tackle spot could be interesting. How about if Brandon Brooks ended up getting hurt? Because he's another kind of a mainstay, kind of a rock.
Yeah,
Not to mention he had his own issues last year.
Yeah, he had the anxiety problems, and that's where sort of you saw the versatility of Isaac Seumalo, who played left guard and started games at left guard, and right tackle last year as a rookie. So that kind of tells you what they think about him and his ability to move all over the offensive line. And it's interesting because I talked to Isaac last week, and he played every position in college at Oregon State except left guard. So he can basically play every single position on the offensive line if you need him to, including center. And that's sort of what happened when Brandon had anxiety issues. But if you look forward, this season, Seumalo is going to start. So in theory, he's going to be entrenched at left guard. But they still have a ton of depth inside. They re-signed Stefan Wisniewski, who can play any of the interior positions. He can play center. He can play both guard spots. They signed Chance Warmack away from Tennessee, a former top 10 pick in this league, who started out at left guard, but he can play right guard. So they have a lot of depth, specifically on the interior of the offensive line. And they will have a number of options if something like that did happen.
John McMullen with us. Let's talk about Jason Kelce. What about him? Does Wisniewski get the nod there? Does Kelce, if he's the starter, do they move Seumalo there and plug Barbre at left guard?
Well, Jason's the center. If he's healthy, he's going to be the starter. If he were to go down or if they were to trade him or something of that nature, I would imagine it depends on where you are in the season. For instance, now that we're past June 1st, and I don't think this is going to happen, but if they did trade Jason, I think where we are in the offseason, I think the plan would be to move Isaac over and start him at center and then have probably Barbre and Chance Warmack kind of fight it out for left guard with Wisniewski. If it were to happen in season, if it was an injury type thing, then I think Wisniewski would take over at center.
Moral of the story, John, is they've got a lot more depth and opportunities, and I guess this all stems from you had suspension to Johnson, anxiety from Brooks, Vitae injury, Barbre went down. I mean, 4 guys had to go down last year, and what happened? Were they 5 starting right tackles last season?
Yeah, and the last one, as I mentioned, they were forced in that Baltimore game to play Isaac at right tackle. And he actually played very well, and that opened the Eagles' eyes a lot because he didn't get much practice at that position. And Baltimore's got a pretty good defensive front, and he battled and he held up pretty well. So that just made them even higher on him as a player. And his ability to do different things. But, yeah, they learned from that, and you've seen around the league, specifically good teams. Seattle for years has had a very poor offensive line, and you could argue that that's the reason they've sort of taken a step back from what they were when they went to back-to-back Super Bowls. You saw Minnesota start 5-0 last season, and they lost 4 tackles. They played 5 tackles as well as the Eagles, but their backup options weren't nearly as good, and they kind of fell apart. And give the Eagles credit because they understand what depth means on the offensive line, and they've built up to where, if you look around this league as a whole, I always say I don't think people realize the starters are probably top 10 as far as a group. I don't think any team in this league has more depth on the offensive line than the Eagles.
John, you mentioned Chance Warmack. Is he a guy that's maybe a cut candidate or a guy who can win a starting position? How do the Eagles view Warmack? He was a former first-round pick, and, of course, we know the storyline that he's reunited with Stoutland, his old college O-line coach.
Well, and this is a perfect example of what I was saying. The answer to that question, Pete, is both. I could see him getting cut, and I could see him starting. That's how many different options the Eagles have on the offensive line. If Chance shows up in August and he plays poorly, yeah, I mean, the Eagles don't have a ton invested in him, and he could be cut very, very easily. On the other hand, there's a reason he was a top 10 pick in this league. He's tremendous athletically. If Stoutland, as you mentioned, is former college coach, if he can tap into that and figure it out, well, there might be, other than Jason Peters and Lane Johnson, who are, really, really high-level Pro Bowl players, there's probably not a more talented, just base talent offensive lineman on this team than Chance Warmack. I mean, athletically, he can do everything, but it's never clicked at this level. And we'll see if he takes advantage of this second chance.
No pun intended. A couple of been listening for a couple of minutes here with John McMullen, and he did play right guard at Tennessee, left guard in college. So right guard, Tennessee, left guard. Where do they use him?
Well, in OTAs, he's been lining up at left guard as a backup there. But remember, you have the 90-man off-season roster, which is really, really bloated. So you have a ton of bodies. Josh Andrews has kind of been rotating in as a right guard, who's been around for 3 years now. Nobody even talks about him. He's been an NFL player, and he's probably up against it from a number standpoint. But as you mentioned, he can play both, as you mentioned. But right now, he's been working at left guard behind Seumalo, and that's where they started him out. But he'll certainly, by the time training camp rolls around, and probably even minicamp, you'll see him start to get some reps on the right side as well.
Now, that's interesting because at Alabama, he played the left side. He's back with his coach on the left side. You wonder, there's a lot of guys out there. I remember when Danny Watkins was here, and, I used to host the show with him, and he would always tell me about how he hated playing guard. He never played guard before in his life. Now, he didn't have a lot of football experience in his life to begin with, but he was insistent that if he got a chance to play tackle, that he would be much more comfortable. I know the jokes are out there, and everybody can laugh about that, but there's guys who feel more comfortable in a certain spot. Now, Danny had said that every other team that he worked out with tried him out as a tackle. The Eagles were the only one that worked him out as a guard, and we know how that went. And he played left tackle in college, and he said he felt not only more comfortable if he was a left guard. Remember, he played on a right guard. So he said, not only was I out of position, I was on the other side. I'm not making excuses for the kid. He just didn't love the game. That's evident. But a lot of these guys do feel particularly more comfortable on one side or the other.
Oh, yeah, there's no question about that. I think people overlook that, and it's really, really difficult from a fundamental standpoint to switch sides on the offensive line. Just from the body mechanics and things you have to do. So he's not the first guy to have said that. I've heard that from a lot of offensive linemen over the years. They're more comfortable on one side than the other. And that's why guys who are versatile and can play different positions and flip sides are so important, especially in the backup role. And that's why a guy like Alan Barbre, who can basically play every position and play it well, except center, are so important in this league because it is hard and it is difficult. And I think one of the reasons the Eagles have started Warmack back on the left side is because he does feel more comfortable. But when you're in the NFL, and using Danny as an example, athletically, you understand if you're a coach in this league, you have to have certain attributes to play certain positions. And left tackle, you have to have good feet. You have to be athletic for a 300-pounder. And you have to have good handwork. And there's certain traits they look for, length of arms, as a physical trait to play that particular position. And Danny there's no way he could have played left tackle in the NFL. He just didn't have it athletically. So I think from his physical trait standpoint, I think the Eagles were right to put him where they did. He just had a real difficult time with it. And that's why it's so tough to project players from the college level to the pro level. Because just because you played a position in college doesn't mean you can play it in the pros, where you have, the DeMarcus Wares of the world as weak side pass rushers, which you're not going to see every week at the college level.
The ability to put out fires or wield an axe, apparently not a trait that carries over into the NFL. We're talking.
I can tell you. Let me tell you. I can tell you two things real fast about Dan. Number one, he was a really, really, really nice kid.
Kelowna, British Columbia.
The second thing was he was really, really cheap.
Oh yeah,
really cheap. Yes, he was really cheap.
Coming from you, that's interesting.
NFL player not picking up the check, you got to force that on him. Like.
So we're spending time with John McMullen. Hey, the Eagles did make a minor move today, John. They waived linebacker Steven Daniels. Don't they need more depth at linebacker, not cutting guys?
Yeah, in theory. I thought that was an interesting waiver pickup when they picked him up, because Steven was a really good player in college at Boston College, and he's a middle linebacker. He is just a flat-out, old-school middle linebacker, very much like physically like Stephen Tulloch was. He's real short, 5'11", about 245, and they need depth behind Jordan Hicks. So I thought there was a chance that he might open some eyes, but obviously that didn't happen. Joe Walker is about ready to get back into team drills. I think that signaled that's going to happen maybe even as early as next week, that he'll be back working. And he was one of the Eagles' 7th-round picks last year. They liked a lot. He was going to make the team. He was going to be the backup to Jordan Hicks, and he tore his ACL. So I think right now they feel the same way. Joe Walker's going to get healthy, and he's going to be the backup in the middle.
Where do you stand, John? I wanted to get into it with you a little bit about where you stand on the OTA debate, because there's 4 sets of OTA off-season workouts. The month of May used to be a real quiet time in the NFL, and now it's almost like, because you talked about Jason Peters earlier, it's almost like if we're not having our daily update of who's there and who's not there, and these are voluntary workouts, it seems like there's two sides to this. I mean, some of the coaches, especially Jim Schwartz, love it. Some of the players, obviously, especially with the voluntary thing, do not. Where do you stand on the whole OTAs, good or bad?
Well, you need OTAs. I think the interest in them is really it's more of the explosion of popularity with the league itself. I mean, with the new CBA, they work less now than they did before. So it's not like they do more. In fact, coaches pull out their hair because they can't do anything. There's no pads. There's basically OTAs, or one coach described to me as meetings and walkthroughs. That's basically all it is. And it's really difficult to teach. So what Jim was saying, that he loves the off season because that's the time you could teach as a coach. But the coaches themselves, they can't stand how scaled back the OTAs are now. So I think there's two different things. The interest level about who's here and who's not there, as I said, it's fueled by the popularity of the league as a whole. From the new CBA, the current CBA, you've actually scaled back dramatically how much work the players do in May, even if it's just working out. When they're not here for OTAs and after minicamp, and we saw it last year when Nelson Aguilar got in trouble. So June 14th, I think, is the last day of minicamp. Then you're off till training camp. You're locked out of the building. They're like us. We're just talking about the media house. They couldn't show up if they wanted to because the CBA prevents it. And they can't, have work. They can't speak to the coaches. They can't have meetings. They can't be taught things. So as I said, it depends how you look at it. And the actual work level of how much they do in May, again, it's been drastically scaled back. That was a big win for the players in the previous CBA, arguably the only win.
All right, Johnny Mack with the Eagles OTAs in the books for this week. They'll get back on the field next week. We got, of course, the mini camp, and then little June is like or I guess like late June, early July is when you get the quiet time. That's when Johnny gets a little time off.
Yeah, a little bit. We get like a 2-week vacation. But then, so many things happen. If you go away for a week, you got to spend a week trying to catch up.
And that's when they'll replace Stephen Daniels.
Exactly. Hey, this is Philadelphia. This is what Chip Kelly hates about Philadelphia. We talk about players like Stephen Daniels.
That's right. All right, man. Take care, pal.
All right, thanks, guys.